Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And have you seen The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent with Nicolas Cage and the Red Prince, Prince Oberyn Martell, The Mandalorian, Pedro Pascal? I haven't either, so I can't really tell you anything about it or whether or not you should watch it. But if you're new to this podcast, you'll figure out really quickly that the official stance of the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast is that you shouldn't watch anything ever, because it's all bad and it's all offensive, and I don't recommend anything. But I'll go and watch it as an act of service in humility to all of you, so I can tell you about things that get made that are definitely bad that you definitely shouldn't watch. Well, this is one I can't recommend or not recommend because I haven't seen it at all, but I saw the title and I was like, dang, that's real stinking clever right there. And in a little while, I'm going to be talking about the parable of the talents. And I'm going to remember that that's the title of that show because I think there's like some kind of likewise in there. Again, acknowledging that I have no idea what this movie is actually about, it would appear to me that it might have something to do with the perceived unbearable weight of massive talent, and that maybe Nick Cage is actually playing a version of Nick Cage that is somehow hyperbolic, an extended expression of the reality of the situation, kind of the same way Jean-Claude Van Damme did in that very meta movie that came out in the 2000s. I think it was just called JCVD. That was a good show, and I also don't recommend it. And the idea is that, man, when there's expectations on you, that can be a tremendous burden to bear, and that maybe it could even be crushing if that weight of expectations is unfairly placed upon one. There was a show that came out in 99. It was Magnolia. Tom Cruise and Philip Seymour Hoffman and William H. Macy, the guy who played the shoveler from Mystery Men. And I think William H. Macy's character in that was like the kid genius who was on some kind of quiz show and he won everything and he had all of this talent and potential. And the character was interesting because gradually over the course of his life, the crushing expectations of society and the world in general, because of the massive amount of talent he had, the cruel expectations of society became too much to bear, and he became washed up in a sad, sympathetic character, an embittered character. And again, I get the impression that Nicolas Cage is the same thing in this kind of deal. And there's a reason that this, though rarely explored archetype, is still one that we can relate to. And it's because, don't we all to some degree feel like life comes with potential? Like there's something I ought to be doing here. There's something I ought to be contributing. And isn't that to some extent part of why birthdays and New Year's tend to be a downtime for most people? Because it's the passing of another year of age or a year on the calendar. And so this is Christmas. And what have you done? For me, Christmas and birthday, it's the exact same time of year, so it's a lot to reflect on because then New Year's is right after Christmas. You know how this all is? It's a lot baked in there. But why? Why do we feel that expectation? Well, at the most basic level, I think we feel this pressure and this expectation because we understand intuitively that humans are full of potential, and we feel that potential, and people told us that we had potential. We want to do something with it. We want to give back. There's meaning somehow in life when we do that. And if it feels like we're just messing around or things didn't quite work or we took a couple swings and the investments didn't pay off, that can be a source of supreme lifelong narrative crafting disappointment. And because that is such a relatable, ever-present, cruel pressure that we feel, stories about people crumbling under pressure or having this existential weight upon them, stories that most of us, even if like me, you're of middling talent, you can still relate to that pressure and that occasional sense of disappointment in terms of delivering. Where am I going with all of this stuff? Where I'm going is to Matthew chapter 25 to get us into what is probably my favorite, if not my second favorite parable in the Gospel of Matthew. My three favorite parables in the Bible are this one, the parable of the talents that we're going to be talking about for the next few days, the parable of the wheat and the tares that we talked about back in chapter 13, and then the parable of the shrewd manager that I'm always referencing from over in Luke. This parable of the talents is one that transcends the Bible. It goes beyond the boundaries of Christianity, of the religion, of Christian thought. Even the use of the word talented, in a sense, is a reflection of this parable. So I'm just going to read it to you out of context. Of course, we'll look at it in context in the coming days and all of that. But I just want to start on the existential side here. I want you to think, as I read this thing, about what the difference is between the pressure that the characters in this are feeling and the pressure that William H. Macy's failed boy genius character felt, or that I imagine Nick Cage's character feels in this Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent movie, or that maybe you feel from time to time on birthdays and anniversaries. What's the difference between the pressure that these characters feel in this story from Matthew 25 and the pressure that we feel on planet Earth? All right, here we go. Matthew 25:14. Jesus talking here. Again, it'll be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. Quick historical side note that we will explore more deeply in episodes to come. A talent is a unit of weight. So this is a ludicrous amount of money if we're talking about silver, I assume, since the translation is money, that we're talking about silver in not a raw form, but in a tradable, carryable form, like coinage of some sort. It's not like a government authorized silver here, but so much of it that it is best measured in a weight. And this is a lot of weight. We'll talk about exactly how much money we're talking about, but think like crazy money, crazy opportunity here. There's pressure that comes with that, right? All right, I keep reading verse 16. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. And the man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I gained 5 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Which is, I mean, that's a paraphrase now. Or I guess commentary would be the better word for it. That's just awesome. Isn't that what everybody wants? It's just that word of affirmations, like your life has been lived in some way right. You were shown potential. You were given opportunity. You paid it off the way you ought to have. Well done. There's joy and good things on the other side. Come and share in that and celebrate it. All right, verse 22. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I gained 2 more. And his master replied, even though it's only 2 talents, it's not as big a turnaround. The master replied the same way. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I know that you're a hard man, harvesting where you haven't sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. See, though, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew then that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I haven't scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he'll have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The way these parables toward the end of Matthew work, you're definitely noticing there's a severe warning at the back end of all of them, and we always get to the severe warning part, and I understand that it kind of colors the way we read the rest of it. So leave that there, put a pin in it, we're going to talk about it, but let's just go back to the basic introductory question of the day, and that is this question of pressure that everybody feels, drip, 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 all the time. It's right there. It's the pressure of expectations we put on ourselves. It's the pressure of expectations that other people put on us, that society has. This is a pressure that compounds with the passage of time or with failed investments or failed attempts to do something with it, or it compounds even the most when we don't even try to do anything with it because we're just paralyzed and we don't know what to do. So we got that pressure all the time, but there's a contrast here because these guys apparently felt a pressure as well, and 2 of the 3 responded to that pressure in a way that the parable holds out as being desirable. They hustled. They went and figured something out. It was a big investment. But they seem to have felt empowered by what they knew about the character of the master who had these expectations for them. And because they seem to have felt great confidence in the character of the master, it looked like they were liberated a little bit, like free to take these resources and just try something, go do it. And what do you know? It worked out in both of these cases. Now, the third guy seems to have felt an added pressure because he did not understand the character of the master and attributed to the master ill intent it was not accurate. And when the master's like, oh, really? So I'm this kind of person and this kind of person toward the end. I don't think he's saying, oh, yeah, I definitely reap where I don't sow. I definitely steal from my neighbors and stuff. I think the master there is clearly using a rhetorical device to be like, well, if I'm as big a monster as you say I am, I would tread lightly. And we'll dig into that element of the response more later on. But the fundamental difference is the two guys who got a return felt liberated by a healthy pressure because they believed in and had great confidence in the quality of the character of the master. And so as a result, the crippling pressure that the third guy felt, and that so often I think you and I as human beings feel, and Nicolas Cage maybe feels in this movie, and that the boy wonder William H. Macy character felt in Magnolia, that pressure was crippling, was paralyzing for that third dude. And he lashed out with blame and anger at the master over things that he really was inflicting upon himself and weights he did not have to carry around. And having fear and self-doubt and even character flaws like blaminess cripple us and paralyze us so that we don't do anything effective. There's the big picture view over the whole thing. Now, obviously, what we want to do next is like the contextual view as opposed to the contextless view. And think about, why is this parable happening right here in Matthew 25? Like, we're still in the middle of one big flow of thought about the end of the age and how things are going to work out in a kingdom view of the unfolding of history. It would be very easy for you and I to strip this parable of its larger meaning and just boil it down to what I think would be a very helpful life lesson, kind of what we looked at today, and just leave it at that. But I think there's a ton more here, and we're going to try and get into the ton more stuff that is here and talk about how that reads back into the parable of the 10 virgins, which we're also not totally done with, that came right before this. I never know if I tell you enough, but here we are at the end of another one of these conversations, and I'm just thinking to myself, I really like you, and I really appreciate you. And if I say that, I'm always worried that maybe you won't totally believe me, or you'll think that's just a thing that you're supposed to say when people make podcasts. You're just supposed to do that. That's not how I feel. I get to every single day turn on a microphone in my silly, self-important basement room and talk about things in a book that I think is really important, like a normal person. I get to act like myself. And it's because you will receive that. It's because you're gracious with me and you keep me from feeling a gigantic weight of heaped upon expectations that could be crippling and paralyzing. And so as I look at this passage today, I just want to pause and express again my great appreciation for you. This is an odd relationship we have, mediated by an odd technology, but how you are and who you are on the other end of this thing is very gracious, and it's very life-giving to me, and you mean a lot to me. Thank you. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.